All right, welcome. Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest, most fundamental ideas in all of biology, reproduction. I mean, it's the reason life continues, right? But as you're about to see, the how and the why of it all, well, that's where things get really fascinating.
So let's dive right in with the most basic question of all. Why bother reproducing? I mean, why do organisms even do it? It kind of seems obvious at first, but trust me, the answer is a lot more complex than you'd think.
And here's the real puzzle. Think about it. An organism doesn't actually need to reproduce to stay alive. It's not like eating or breathing. It takes up a ton of energy. So if you're just looking at it from one individual's point of view, what's the point?
And this slide just lays it out perfectly. The stuff like nutrition, breathing, all that, that's for individual survival, for you to stay alive. But reproduction? That's all about the survival of the species. It's the one thing that keeps the whole show going. Really, the only reason we even notice a species is because it's successful at making more of itself.
Okay, so let's zoom all the way in. Let's look at how this all happens at the most fundamental level you can get, the level of our biological blueprints. Because this is where the real magic and, the occasional mistake really happens.
At the very core of it all, reproduction is really just about one thing: copying a blueprint. And that blueprint is DNA. It's got every single instruction for building an organism, all packed up super neatly inside the chromosomes in a cell's nucleus.
So, this brings up a really, really important question. Are the copies of this DNA blueprint perfect every single time? I mean, if you're making copies of something over and over and over again, can you really do it flawlessly?
The answer is a big, fat never. It just doesn't happen. No biochemical reaction is 100% reliable. So yeah, every single time that DNA gets copied, little errors, little glitches can sneak in. And these tiny little differences are what we call variation. It's the reason that offspring look a whole lot like their parents, but they're never perfect, identical copies. Now, you hear the word error, and you probably think that's a bad thing, right? But these errors are actually the secret sauce, the key ingredient, for a species to survive in the long run. And this is why that variation is basically a superpower. Think about it like this. Every species is pretty well suited to its little spot in the world, its niche. But what happens if that niche changes? Let's say global warming heats up the water where some bacteria live. If they were all perfect clones, poof, they'd all get wiped out. But because there's variation, maybe a few of them, just by chance, are a little more heat resistant. They're the ones that survive, and they're the ones that get to reproduce. So you see, variation isn't a bug, it's a feature. It's the species' ultimate insurance policy for survival.
Okay, with all that in mind, let's take a look at the simplest way to get the job done. Reproduction that only needs one parent. We're talking about the world of clones, asexual reproduction.
For a lot of single-celled organisms, like this amoeba you see here, it's honestly about as simple as it gets. The cell just gets bigger, copies its DNA, and then splits right down the middle. One cell becomes two. That's it. This process is called fission. Okay, but things get even weirder and more amazing when you look at slightly more complex creatures. Take this little guy, for instance. This is a planaria, a simple flatworm with a seriously incredible ability. Because if you cut it into pieces, yeah, you heard me, each and every piece can grow into a completely new, whole individual. We're not just talking about healing a wound here. This is full-blown reproduction, all thanks to some really specialized cells that can rebuild the whole animal from just a fragment. How cool is that? Organisms like this hydra here use a similar method called budding. It literally just grows a little bud on its side, a tiny clone of itself. Once that little mini-me is mature enough, it just detaches and bam, you've got a brand new hydra.
And then there's another really clever strategy, spore formation. You've probably seen this on bread mold. See those little blobs? They're called sporangia, and they're packed with these tiny, tough cells called spores. These spores are like little survival pods. They can handle really tough conditions. And when one lands on a nice, damp piece of bread, for example, it just starts growing into a whole new organism. So, when you look at all of these, fission, fragmentation, budding, spores, the key thing they all have in common is that it's all done with just a single individual. It's super efficient for sure, but there's one big limitation. And that limitation brings us to a whole other way of doing things, which is way more complex. It's a recipe for variation, sexual reproduction.
This really begs the question, right? If creating clones works so well and is so simple, Why on earth did this other, way more complicated method evolve? What was the problem that sexual reproduction was the solution for?
Well, the answer brings us right back to our superpower, variation. Asexual reproduction, yeah, it generates some variation, but only through those super slow, random DNA errors. Sexual reproduction, it's like hitting the accelerator. By combining the DNA from two different individuals, you're constantly shuffling the deck, creating brand new combinations of genes with every single offspring. It's basically a variation-generating machine. Now, this whole combining DNA thing created a bit of a math problem. If you just took two individuals and smushed their full sets of DNA together, the baby would have double the amount. That would be a complete disaster. So life came up with this really elegant solution. Organisms evolved to create special sex cells, we call them gametes, that have only half the normal amount of DNA. That way, when one half from one parent combines with a half from the other, the new individual has the exact right amount again. Problem solved.
All right, so let's bring this home and look at how this process works in one of the most complex examples out there, us, the human method.
Now, in humans, becoming ready to reproduce isn't like flipping a switch. It's a whole process that takes years, and we call it puberty. Basically, as our bodies slow down from just growing taller, they start putting energy into maturing all the reproductive tissues. And this kicks off all those changes we know so well. Hair growing in new places like armpits and the genital area, breast development in girls, voices deepening in boys, the whole thing.
And all this specialization leads to two very different but complementary reproductive systems. You have the male system, which is mainly driven by the hormone testosterone. Its whole job is to produce and deliver sperm, these tiny little gametes that can move. Then you have the female system, which runs on hormones like estrogen. Its job is to produce a much larger gamete, the egg or ovum, which is packed with food stores, and to get the body ready to nurture a developing embryo. So when one of those sperm cells meets the egg, you get fertilization. And that creates a single, brand new cell called a zygote. From there, it starts dividing like crazy, becoming an embryo. This tiny embryo then implants itself into the lining of the uterus. That's where it continues to grow and develop, getting all its nutrients from the mother's body through an incredible tissue called the placenta for about 9 months as it develops from an embryo into a fetus.
So when you really step back and look at the whole picture, this entire incredibly complex biological drive, from a single bacterium splitting in two all the way up to us, it's all about one thing: copying and passing on its blueprint. But for us humans, that blueprint isn't just our DNA anymore, is it? We pass on ideas, we pass on culture, technology, knowledge, which leaves us with a final, much bigger question to think about. What kind of blueprint, in every single sense of the word, is humanity creating for the future?